Hello, welcome to Ralph Reads, brought to you by TURN, the United Ronin Networks. My name is Ralph Anthony Garcia, also known as R4, the legal, the loyal, the regal, the royal, Ronin Ralph, your master of ceremonies. Let me just say thank you for joining me on Ralph Reads and asking y'all again to tell a friend to tune in to TURN, the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. On tonight's edition of Ralph Reads, I introduce a best-selling story released by the heralded Holloway House Publishing Company. This is the life of the gentleman pimp, written by Andrew Stonewall Jackson. Let's get right to it, and no bullshit. Let the reading commence. He who thinks in terms of catching mice will never catch lions. Andrew Stonewall Jackson. Sit down, dear reader, and read a story only a fool will tell. That's how Andrew Stonewall Jackson candidly assesses this frank and gutsy story of his life, a life that starts in the savage jungle of Detroit's ghetto. As in any jungle, the unwritten code of survival is all that counts. And by the age of 16, Jackson had passed the acid test of the streets. He became a thief and graduated to a major league pimp. Jackson's story is ruthless, a tale such as few have dared to tell. Dedication. To those whose paths of life have crossed with mine, and who have helped to make my life as rich and as colorful as it has been. Chapter 1. Yeah, it was the summer of 1967, and I was once again awaiting transfer to the world's largest walled prison for a new bit, 18 months to 2 years. The jail was packed, but I was one of the lucky cats who had a bunk of his own and who no longer had to fight the big humpback rats that prowled the jailhouse floors and freeloaded in every cell on the tier. Some nights, when it's extremely hot, the man doesn't have to lock up. But this night wasn't quite warm enough for the night out thing. Well, it didn't matter to me if the doors were opened or closed, because I got my bit and I had 2 great books to read. One of them was Pimp and the other was Trick Baby. both written by a fine black writer named Robert Beck, who wrote under his ghetto pseudonym Iceberg Slim. And I found upon reading them that Brother Beck and I had a good deal in common. I was getting all wrapped up in this book, Pimp, when the music on the radio was overpowered by the signal of the jail's transmitter. Monotoned, monotonous, squawky police calls. This kind of ish went on all night long, and it was still going on when we had our morning meal. Detroit's Wayne County Jail was suddenly overloaded with black men, and when I found out what was happening, I could have killed myself, because for the second time in my life, I felt like I had been robbed. During the race riot of 1943, I had been on my way to Jackson Prison. And now, in 1967, I was in county jail, once again on my way to Jackson Prison. Wow. Oh Lord, my God. I thought, what had I done to blow the chance to get myself over the hump? The big heat was on, and that night, and the next 3 nights to follow, police sirens, ambulance sirens, and car horns pitched a bitch. Many of us watched the activity from our cell windows the first few nights of the big heat. One night, we saw the police stop 3 white fellows in a car, pulling a trailer. Stopped them right in front of the jail. They ordered the white guys out of the car, put the cops' rub on them, then asked them to open the trailer. From the actions of the white guys opening it, I thought they were as clean as the Board of Health, but when the police emerged from the trailer, they were carrying 3 submachine guns. We figured that the cats were on their way to pull off some shit in the ghetto, then split back to where they came from. But since they were popped right in front of the police station, all the police had to do was walk them into the joint. Yup, the summer was getting real hot. We got a blow-by-blow description of the action from every who came into the joint. And my dear reader, there were many. The jails throughout the city of Detroit were filled. The beach house on Belle Island was also being used as a prison compound. One of the federal prisons, and even Jackson Prison, was used to lock up for all the police were arresting on a lot of bullshit meatball charges. The who really got over big during that long hot summer are now well-to-do or rich and in business for themselves. Yeah, had I been on the stem during the big burn, I'd be one of the many that got over the hump. The police were knocking off all the competition on the stem, and I would have cleaned up had I been out there. But I wasn't. I was in county jail with a long stretch ahead of me and 2 good books to while away the time. Chapter 2. Since Brother Bob's books proved to me that my life story could be told, and since it should be told honestly, in the raw, nitty-gritty fashion, I'm going to tell it like it was. So sit back and be prepared to read a confession that only a fool would write. Most of the people you'll read about are still with us, so the names have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty. My head wasn't ripped off by a bitch when I was a child, so I'll use the age 13 as my starting point. Anything that happened before then was the usual ghetto kid-ish anyway. To start with, I like to set records in divine order about my name. Most of those I know think Stonewall is just a ghetto handle, but it is indeed my true name. I was born on Ford Street in the city of Detroit on the 22nd day of May in 1921, which makes me a Gemini. And the reason my mother gave me the handle of Andrew Stonewall Jackson was because I was born with a veil over my face. and the doctor told her that I was going to be a great man one day. Well, after you've read my story, you could be the judge of the doctor's prophetic powers. As far as yours truly is concerned, old Doc missed the boat. I never got to know my dad. He died when I was about 6 months old. I was the baby of the Jackson family, and there were 4 of us. The oldest was Charles Bernard Jackson, who was named after my father, who died while in Jackson prison in the year 1945. Next came another brother and a sister, and then me. After my father died, my mother married a grand and wonderful gent who also died in the summer of 1945. To be quite frank, I'm not from a close-knit family. We were just a bunch of people who had the same address. And me, I was the kind of brat that spent every moment of every day thinking up ways to con somebody. It was usually my mom and stepfather that I'd end up conning. My stepfather had a barbershop on Rivard, near Division, for as long as I can recall, and my mother spent all her free time squatting in the barbershop. We lived on the 2nd floor, above the barbershop. I think she was just hung up on that barbershop bullshit that the guys rapped about, or she just liked being around my stepfather. Anyway, whenever I caught her in the shop, it meant it was righteous for me to slip up and get a few bucks from my stepfather's fat bankroll. Well, this is how the set was this day. Pop was chopping a stud's mop, and Mom was in her favorite squat behind the stove, which meant the time was kosher for me to do my famous Jimmy Valentine thing. After taking the back way up, I did my top-notch, soft shoe bit into the bedroom. I looked where the bankroll was the last time I copped a taste, but it wasn't there. It had been moved, and it wasn't the first time this had happened. It just meant a few more seconds of hunting. After finding the fat BR, I removed a few pound notes from the center of it and placed it back in the same way it was when I found it. After copping, I did my raffle kind of thing and made my exit out the back door and slid down the roof to the alley. Now, should the chips be missed, no one would ever know I'd been in the pad. I spent the bread on my little puppy love and smoked a lot of pot. No one said anything about the bread, and the whole sting was clean and righteous. One night, about a week later, there was a show going on in one of those storefront churches. It cost a dime to get in, and the attraction was some fake magician sawing a woman in half. But I was more attracted by the box they kept the admission money in. The church was a block from where I lived, which to me meant that I didn't have far to go once I copped the box. I paid my admission and sat down. The old bat on the door who rode shotgun on the money box, really a cigar box, never did act like she was going to give me the chance to take it. All the while I was looking at the phony act up front. I peeked back at the door to see if she had moved, but she wasn't moving. I was starting to feel that this was going to be a dry run when I looked back and saw the old bat step over to rap with another old bat. The box was just sitting there, waiting for me, unguarded. I got up and headed for the door, noting that everything was still in divine order. I picked up the box and split, coolly, in fact. I walked home with it in my hand, not bothering to hide it from view. When I was walking home, I felt like I pulled off a real big caper. I entered the barber shop and I took a count on the sting. $9 and some change. After putting the bread in my pocket, I went upstairs to eat. My dad was sitting up there in the front room like he was waiting for me.
"Hi, Pop,"
I said.
"What you doing up so late?" "I'm waiting on you,"
he said.
"What do you want?"
I said, approaching him.
"I want that money you stole from me today."
I knew he was young because I hadn't beat him that day, so I said,
"You got the wrong cat." You got the wrong cat, Pop. I ain't stole nothing from you today.
He reached over and touched my pocket. And when he felt all the change, he said,
Yeah, boy, then where did you get all that money you got in your pocket? Oh, Pop,
I said,
that's just some money I won in a crap game. I could get lucky too, you know. Boy,
he said,
that's what's left of the money you stole from me today.
Well, to make a long story short, he took the money and beat my ass with a razor strap. I felt like I'd been robbed and had my ass tagged for nothing. I got up the next morning with my ass still sore, and I went to school. On my way to school, I usually made 2 stops. One to pick up my morning pot so I could be high throughout that school bit, and the other to steal a few things from the Eastern Market for my little puppy love. Reefers at that time cost 2 for 15 cents, or you could cop a Crescent for 2 bits. The Crescent was the bomb. It had a filter with cotton in it, and there was about 3 good pulls to it. It also had a stamp on the moon and star on it. After picking up the things for my puppy love, I went by and picked up my morning Crescent and rode my bike onto Russell's school where I smoked it. When I got to school, I gave my love her things, and when she reached for them, she looked at me real hard.
Stony?
She said.
What's the matter with your eyes?
Nothing that I know of, I said. Why? What's the matter with them?
They're just so red.
I knew they were that way from the weed I've been smoking, so I just said,
I went swimming last night at the Brewster Center, and you know that stuff they put into the water make everybody's eyes red.
We stole a kiss, and she went to her class, and I went to mine. For some reason, I was higher than I'd usually been after smoking one of those Crescents. But still, I was my usually clowning self during school, always pulling off a lot of simple, dizzy, silly shit. This day, I concealed myself in the clothes closet. I heard a teacher calling for me. She called a few times. Then suddenly, the closet door burst open, and the teacher said,
Andrew, come out of there this minute!
I came out and took my seat, and a few pals in the room pointed to the fink who had crossed me. He was a little nigger who lived around the corner from me, and since I didn't like him anyway, I planned to get even with him. The pot had me so high till I was laughing at everything. I was even laughing when the teacher told me to get under her desk. But after I was under the desk and she sat down, the laughing stopped. I had never been that near to a woman's legs before in my life, and oh Lord, did they look good. As I looked at her real pretty legs and her lovely knees, all kind of shit was going through my young mind. Here I was, getting a close-up view, and I'd never been this close to a grown woman's legs before. Wow, what a tasty thrill this was. The pot I had smoked caused me to have many, many ideas. The teacher was a fine bitch. She was young and jacked up like a black goddess. As high as I was still doing everything I could under that desk to keep her feet from touching me and praying that she'd forget I was under there. If she forgot about me, I thought, perhaps I'd get a chance to see her big thighs, and she just might open up her legs. She kept moving her big ass around in her seat, and seeing this, along with all the shit that was going on in my mind, caused my every time she moved her big ass, my hit the wall, so I pulled it out and started to toy with it. Oh Lord, my God, I thought. Please make her open her legs so I can see that thing of hers. And just as I thought that, she opened her legs to rub the inside of her thigh. My God, did her thighs look good to me. I started to pump my wheel faster, and it felt good. Then, suddenly, she opened her legs wide, and when I dug that fat puff at the top of her thighs, I had the desire to kiss her knee, and I climaxed. She was so fat at her cave that she looked like she was wearing a fighter's protection cup. Yup, my dear reader, she had the fattest love nest that I've seen to this day. Yeah, the old teacher must have been wearing an afro between her legs then, 'cause God knows, fat as that thing was, it couldn't have been all love nest. But if it was all her thing, she really had a money getter. I cleaned myself off with my hanky, and to this day, I've wondered if she knew what she was doing, or whether she really forgot about me being under that desk. I know one thing. It was that day that I learned where my place in school was. Under the desk. The next day, I set the clock ahead in the classroom. We were all ready to go home when the teacher learned the clock had been set off key. She asked us all to sit back down, and after we had all been seated, she asked,
Who set the clock up?
After she'd asked 3 times, the same little fink that crossed me the day I was put under the desk stood up and pointed at me.
Andrew?
She said,
Why did you set the clock up?
You mean to say that I set the clock up just because that little Robert said so?
I said indignantly.
Well, Andrew, Robert has never told me a lie before, so I've got to believe him.
She said. Well, there was no trip under the desk for me this time. Instead, I was told to bring my ass to the top dog of the school. When I got to his office, he gave me the same bullshit about there being just one more time and I'd be sent to the Moore School for Boys. The next day, I got even. While we were changing classes, I ran up the line till I got in back of the fink Robert. I walked along behind him till we got to the top of the steps. Then I placed my foot in the center of his back and sent him skidding down the stairs, his chin catching each step. Some of his chops were knocked out in the ride. The teacher sent me home, and Robert's mother was called to come get him. That night, his mother brought him by the barbershop to show my people what I had done to him. The little was wrapped up like a mummy and looked as silly as he ever looked. His old lady and my old lady talked about it for an hour. Then his old lady took the mummy by the hand and split. My folks quizzed me about it but didn't do anything to me. You see, my people and his people didn't think much of each other. The next morning, I got to school. I was told that I was being sent to Moore School. I was to report there Monday morning and was given the school's address. The address I was given said the school was on Alger off Oakland, which was on the north end of Detroit. I got up that Monday, went and copped some pot, got on my bike, and smoked when I went out there. The Moore School was known for misfits, and I could tell from one look at the that went there that this school was a bitch. There was no female teachers, and if anyone was put under the desk, it wouldn't be a treat like at Russell. After I was checked in, I found that there were a few faces I knew. The fellows behind those kisses all smoked pot, and this meant I had someone to smoke with every day. This school was a bitch, all right, but it didn't change any of my old ways. I was still a that stayed in a lot of ish. My first year at this prison kind of school was truly tough. I had been getting cracks on my ass from damn near all of the teachers in the joint. In case you ain't hip to the Moore School, let me pull your coat to the cracks on the ass bit. Whenever a kid did something that was bogue, you were never told to get under the desk. You were, however, told to bend over and touch your toes and take a number of cracks on your ass. Since it was an all-boys school, that meant all the teachers were men. The slab of wood you got tagged with was indeed a tricky piece of timber. It was a good 3 feet long, about 5 inches wide, and at least an inch thick. At the end of it was about a dozen holes. Now dig this. The holes are there for one reason, and that's to suck up some of the meat of your already tight when it comes in contact with it. And when it's pulled up from the tag, the meat that was sucked up in the holes is released and it causes a second sting. I call it a speedball tag. This kind of shit went on for 2 years with me at the mall. Then one day I was told to bend over and touch my toes for some kind of bullshit that I'd done. I was supposed to take 10 cracks on the ass. The teacher was huge. He was well over 6 feet and weighed between 300 and a ton. Well, I just about had it with the cracks on my young tender ass, and I was ready to be sent to BVS, Boys Vocation School. So I stood back and looked up at this giant and said, "Sir, I'm not going to take any more hits with that plank."
Stonewall?
He said.
You mean you refuse to go along with the rules of this school?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, 'cause I'm not allowing you to lean on me with that tricky stick no more. The old guy surprised me. He didn't say anything about me being sent to BVS. Instead, he said,
How old are you, Stonewall?
"I'm 16, sir," I said.
Well,
he said,
if you're 16, you don't have to take them because you're old enough to quit.
"In that case," I said, "I quit, sir." All of the fellows in the classroom were looking on as he opened his desk drawer and got a streetcar ticket and gave it to me. I picked up my lid and split. As I rode my bike home, I thought to myself, damn, here I am, a 16-year-old kid, and out in the streets of Detroit. What was I going to tell my folks? What the hell was I going to do all day? I had no eyes for gigging anywhere, so just what was a young, peppy like me gonna do? I rode my bike, thinking this kind of ish till it was time for school to be out, and I went home. Chapter 3. The first thing I did when I got home was give my dad the streetcar ticket. I didn't tell him I had quit school. "What do you got for me to do?" I asked him. He looked over at one of the 2 men who were waiting and said, "Say, Tom, do you mind if the boy works on you? I'm learning him how to barber, and he needs to practice."
Hell no,
Tom said.
I don't mind. He's a lot better barber than you are.
Old Tom took a squat in one of the chairs, and I went on to chop his nappy mop and shave him. And at the same time, I had to smell his goat breath. I chopped the mops and shaved the mugs and cuffed the boots of about 6 hicks before the shop closed. I got about $4 for the work that I had did. I then cleaned up the shop and knew I could never be a barber because I really dislike the smell of a lot of fellows that I worked on. The breath of them smelled like bedbugs, and their bodies smelled like 100 armpits. It was a damn shame I had to feel that way, because I was a true barber when I was 14 years old. Oh well, that's life, I guess. The next morning, my mother woke me for school, as she always did. I got up, got dressed, had breakfast, got my going to school money, which made me have quite a taste for a kid of 16, and I split. For a week, I hit the stem in the morning as though I were going to school. I found it a real bitch being in the street all day without anyone to rap with, no one to steal with, no one to look off with, no one to do a damn thing with. Yeah, I found that I was the loneliest kid in the city of Detroit. The one morning when my mother woke me up for school, I point blank told her that I had quit a week ago. She told my dad, and my dad told me, "Boy, if you're old enough to quit school, you're old enough to take care of yourself." Well, I f***ed around and didn't take a job as a barber in his shop. So he hit for my house key. You know, it's hard to give up your twister when you know you ain't got no place to sleep. So it goes without saying that I didn't give it up. But one night, while I was in deep slumber, they beat me for it. I didn't miss it till I came home that night and found that I had no twister to get in with. I knocked on the slammer real hard till I got my mother to stick her head out the front window. She looked down at me and she said,
"Well, son, what do you want?"
What do you mean, what do I want?
I said.
I want in, Mom. I'm sleepy.
"Son,
She said.
now that you done quit school, you're on your own."
But Mom,
I said.
I ain't got nowhere to go, and I'm beat for sleep. Drop my key down.
"I'm sorry, son, but it's your dad. He says you'll have to take the job to come back." "Son, take the job."
After I told her I didn't want to be a barber, she left the window. I went to the rear of the house and got a 5-gallon gas can and filled it with water. Then I went back to the front and called her to the window again. As soon as she stuck her head out, I started to dump the water from the gas can all over the front of the house. When she saw this, she said,
"Wait, son, what are you gonna do?"
Mom,
I said,
if you don't drop my twister down, I'm gonna burn the whole damn house down.
She broke a record leaving the window, and in a few seconds, my key hit the ground. I picked up my key, took a match from my pocket, lit it, and tossed it on the pad. When nothing happened, she said in amazement,
"Son, you're crazy."
I went in and got some sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I gave the old man my key, setting my own young ass out in the street. Now there I was, a 16-year-old lad in the street with nowhere to sleep and no job, just a young clown in the street about to pass the acid test of being a man instead of a boy. Well, I did the cat thing with some pals. I slept in a lot of cars. I spent nights with a lot of different sissies, and I stayed with my older sister till her husband started to give me those freeloader looks, which caused me to split. I slept at all 3 of the movie houses that stayed open all night. In fact, it was after the movie janitor woke me up one morning at the main movie house for cats who had nowhere else to sleep with his unforgettable words,
Change aisles. We're going to clean here.
that I found it impossible for me to get my stumps on because my feet had swollen up so much. Yeah, it was that day in my life that caused me to pass the acid test as a man. A brand new world was about to open up for me, and believe me, I moved in on it. I walked out of the show, and while standing on Woodward Avenue, I looked straight out Alfred Street. Then I looked up and down Woodward Avenue. Then I looked down at my big fat ankles, and I really dug what I was wearing for shoes. My dear reader, all I was wearing for shoes was a heavy pair of Stetson Spats. Then I pulled my bankroll out, took a reading on it, and found that all I had in the world was $1.27. After I ate, I'd be on E. It was at that moment in my life that I told myself by nightfall I'd have me a room or be in jail. 'Cause God knows this wasn't my way of life at all, and I'd have to change it. I went to a restaurant a few steps from the show and had breakfast, and after paying for it, I had $1 dime. I spent all that day walking over the city of Detroit on the lookout for spots that could be beat. I also looked for righteous spots where I could beat a car. Since I was teeved on Hastings Street, I knew just about everywhere something hot could be sold. I only had to steal it. Hastings Street was my stem, and I knew it backward. I watched the stopping tricks, and I watched where the trick would park his car, which was always a few blocks away from where he was going. They always parked that far away because they planned to hide their bread in the car, and you can't take it from me. I've taken off some real righteous stings playing behind, so I got a make on damn near every trick that came to Hastings to get his nuts out of pawn. I had a make on every
on Hastings from Adams to Harper, and I played behind them all. One night, I was beating a trick's car when one of the girls dug me. She ran after me and screamed real loud that I had snatched her purse. So you know I had to pull up stakes in a hurry. I didn't know then, but I do know now that no wants anyone beating her tricks unless it's herself. Damn, I'm getting ahead of myself. During my walk around Detroit, I spotted a good car to beat, but it was daylight, so I couldn't do it then. I killed time and prayed that it would still be there when night came in. When it got dark, I walked over to where that bird nest was, and it was still there. My prayers have been answered. The car was still as plush with goodies as it was that morning. I went to work on getting in. I sprung the window and made my entrance. When I had as many bags as I could carry, I closed the door and split. I walked 3 blocks to my pop man's pad, and I knocked on the door, hoping no one would be there so I could take care of my business without other eyes seeing it. When Dickie let me in, I dug that I got my wish. No one else was there. After I got the bags in his pad, I said, "Look, Dickie, hold on to these bags till I get back."
"What's happening, man? Where did you cop?"
he asked. "Just hold them till I get back," I said. "I'll break it down for you then, righteous?" Dickie held the sting, and I split back to the bird nest to get what I left. When I got back to it, I found everything was still kosher, and this time it would be a lot easier because all I had to do was just open the door and cop what was left. I copped the bags and headed back to Dickie's pad. This time, just a few doors from his joint, I dug the rollers round the edge of Winder from Brush Street. I stepped into an alleyway with all the bags and prayed the police wouldn't see me. Everything was cool. I'd see them before they saw me. After they passed me, I stepped out and walked a few doors to my man's pad. Once I got into the pad and opened the bags, I knew I had hit pay dirt. There were vines, sport coats, slacks, and ladies' coats and dresses. Dickie spent $200 with me, and I gave him a lady's coat, a vine, a man's sport coat, and a pair of slacks. I laid these things on him for letting me use his pad as a drop. We sat around and smoked and rapped till it was time for me to carry some of the things to the cleaners and have them altered to fit my makeup. I took 5 vines and 5 pairs of slacks across the street to the cleaner, and this was the start of my wardrobe. I went back to Dickie's, picked up one of the vines and told him to hold the rest of the stuff, and I'd see him when I saw him, and I split. I took the 2 bills Dickie spent with me and went shopping for all the things that were needed to make up as many outfits as I could. After that, I went by my sister's and rented that room she had allowed me to cat in till her guy started leaning on me with his eyes. After I got the room, I put all the stuff that I had bought into the drawers. I copped 2 lids, 6 pairs of socks, 4 ties, 4 shirts, 2 pairs of Stetsons, some shorts and undershirts, some cologne, and everything else I needed. Then I went to the barber shop and got my mop laid. I would have gone to my dad's shop, but I didn't want him to dig me till I was together, and I mean all together. How about that? Only that morning I said to myself that by nightfall I'd have a place of my own, and it all came to pass. I left the barber shop, picked up the 5 pretty vines that I had left for alterations, and went home to get sharp, taking a long needed bath. My sister and her husband were out each time I went to the pad. They didn't see me when I came in with any of my things, and now, as I stood in front of the mirror looking at that fine young looking back at me, I said to myself, "Again, you got to pimp." So all I had to do was get a girl. I was only 16, but I felt like an adult. After standing in front of the mirror, making love to myself, I left the pad to give the girls a chance. I was on my way out when I ran into my sis coming in. When she saw me, she stepped back and looked at me. She looked at me real hard, as though she had never seen me before. As she looked at me with a sort of smile on her face, she said,
"Boy, do you know I thought you were Willie?" What did you do? Where did you get those things? I know you stole them. I don't want the law coming to this house, so don't give this as your address.
My sister was an 18-carat square who really feared the police.
Have no fear,
I said.
I wouldn't do nothing that would put you on the spot with the law.
As I walked off, she stood looking at me, shaking her head. I knew she was happy for me, even though she acted like she was upset on how I had got the new things. Those were dark ages, and I'm far from done flipping pages on Ralph Reads. I would like, or rather love, to thank you, queens and kings, fellow royalty, for stopping by. If you would like to leave a small donation or reach me via social media, go to www.solo.to/RGMC2407 on YouTube. Visit the music channel at RGMC2407 or go to the Art of Bounce podcast channel. Follow the Art of Bounce podcast wherever you stream your favorite programs, including Spotify, Apple, and Amazon. Brought to you by Force-Fed Digital and TURN, the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. Fellow royalty, pick up a good book, read a good story, and set your good self free. I appreciate you and I love you like cooked food. I will see you folks on the next edition of this A.S. Jackson miniseries on Ralph Reads. If you know, you know, whether living out loud or incognito.